Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Start 5090 O-Level Biology, June 2019, paper 1-2, and we'll discuss question 1 to question 19 in this video. With question 1, which two structures are found in all plant epidermal cells? Now you can see this is the cuticle, this is the upper epidermis, and this is the lower epidermis, and then we have the guard cells in them. So you can say the guard cells is part of the epidermis, and this, of course, this opening is called the stoma, and together this is called the stomata. So palisade mesophyll has chloroplasts in them. Spongy mesophyll also has chloroplasts in them, and then the guard cells also have chloroplasts in them. So which two structures are found in all plant epidermal cells? So all plant epidermal cells do not have the chloroplast. So chloroplast is wrong. And if there's no chloroplast, then starch grains cannot be stored in it. So the only answer is B, cell wall and nucleus. All plant cells would have a cell wall, yes, definitely, and a nucleus. So plant epidermal cells, were just trying to see how much you understood this question or not. Then coming to question number 2, which process only occurs by diffusion? Movement of sugars in the phloem, movement of water in the xylem, uptake of carbon dioxide by the blood, and uptake of glucose by the intestinal villi. You see, this is what they're trying to. Movement of water in the xylem would be osmosis. Movement of sugars in the phloem is sort of diffusion, but it's not that type of diffusion because it occurs because of the active transport of hydrogen ions out of the phloem. So movement of sugars in the phloem, but that is not how it enters the phloem. It is the movement of sugars in the phloem would be more mass flow. And uptake of glucose in the intestinal villi is also active transport. This is given in the syllabus. This is the syllabus point. And movement of sugars in the phloem is, of course, the whole phloem flowing, just like a river flowing. That is, of course, by because the movement occurs from source to sink. So the only answer was C, uptake of carbon dioxide by the blood. Now, question 3 is a very important question because it's checking how well you've understood the chapter on osmosis. The diagram shows some cells in the root of a plant that is absorbing water from the soil. So the root hair cell absorbs water from the soil. So water enters cell 1, and then from cell 1 it will go into cell 2, and then from cell 2 it will go into cell 3. So that means the water potential of 1 would be the highest, and then it would go to 2, and then 2 would be higher, and then it will go to 3. So how does the water potential of the cell marked 2 differ from the water potentials of the cell marked 1 and 3? So is it lower than cell 1? Yes, because cell 2 has a lower water potential because water is entering cell 2. Water is entering cell 2 from cell 1. So lower than cell 1, and it has to be higher than cell C. That is why higher water potential to lower water potential going into cell 3. So you have to understand how this was being interpreted. So how does the water potential of cell mark 2 and this was mark 2 was different? So how was this different? Because it has water is entering from 1 to 2. So 1 has to have higher water potential. So cell 2 is lower than cell 1. So this is higher. This is low. So it is entering from 1 to 2. But then this is high as compared, 2 is high as compared to 3. That is why it is moving from 2 to 3. So lower than cell 1 and higher than cell 3. We were talking about cell 2. You were talking about cell 2. Mark 2 differ from the water potentials of the cell marked 1 and 3. So you have to understand from 1 it went to 2. So 1 would have a higher water potential, or you could say 2 would have a lower water potential than 1 and would have a higher than 3. Why? Because it is moving from 2 to 3. So this is how you have to see the movement of water in this part of the root. So it was part of the root, and you have to understand the difference in water potential, which will make water move from the soil into 1 and then from 1 to 2 and 2 to 3. To question number 4, which graph shows the effect of temperature on the rate of a reaction catalyzed by amylase? Now you see temperature all, you must always first look at all the four graphs. Temperature is all on the x-axis, so that means all is nearly correct. And rate of reaction is on the y-axis, same here, same here. Always check it. Is it the same? Sometimes we change it. A and B something else and C and D something else. And then you see in A, the temperature goes up and after a certain point then it suddenly comes down. So if we say the optimum is 40 and after 40 it just comes down immediately. And in this, of course, it goes up and then it comes down slowly. And so we would say the optimum is 40 and it is going to then denature after the optimum 60. Now, this one is a little weird. Why is it a little weird? Is it goes up. So it's going up as the temperature is increasing, but then it becomes constant. As we increase the temperature, the rate becomes constant, which is not possible because if you increase the temperature above the optimum, the rate falls. Now, this was D is even more weird. Why is it weird? Because you see, what happens is that the rate is constant at the beginning from 0 to 50, and then after 50 or after 40, it sort of starts to decrease after 40. But 0 to 40, it is constant. The rate is constant. While in temperature graph, we know that increasing temperature increases the kinetic energy and then it reaches the optimum, and then after the optimum, it falls down. But this was not what was shown in the D graph. Let's look at the D graph. The D graph is very, very weird. Why? Because the rate is constant. The rate is constant from 0 to 40. And then after 40, as the temperature increases, goes down. So partially it is correct that after 40, it is going down. But then what is happening from 0 to 40? This is not the case. So you realize answer B was correct and the rest are all wrong. But I've explained to you why they are all wrong. Then coming to question number 5. What is the effect of a lack of nitrate ions on plant leaf? You see, nitrate are required for proteins, and nitrate is required for the DNA, nitrates are required for the ATP molecule. So, what is the effect of a lack of nitrate ions? So, no proteins. Young leaves grow very slowly. The leaves wilt if there is less water in the soil. Leaves lose their yellow color if there is they don't lose their yellow color. They would be yellow colored if they had less magnesium in the soil. They won't lose their yellow color. They can't become green. If they were yellow and you provide magnesium, then they might lose their yellow color and become green again. All leaves turn very dark green. Now that never happens. That is only if, why would they be dark green? That's genetically determined whether dark green or mid green or light green. So this was wrong as well. Then coming to question number 6. Which word equation describes photosynthesis? Now that's very basic, and as everybody knows that, you know it is CO2 plus CO2 from the air, water from the soil gives you glucose, and it gives you oxygen as well. And this glucose, of course, you write the chemical equation C6H12O6 plus O2, and of course you balance it out, and you balance it out by writing 6 here, 6 here, and 6 here. So which word equation? So they've given you a word equation. They could also give you a chemical equation. So please be ready for that as well. Coming to question number 7. A student performed an experiment to see whether chlorophyll is necessary for photosynthesis. What is a suitable plant for this experiment? You see, you can't remove chlorophyll and then do an experiment. So what you do is you take a variegated leaf. And what is a variegated leaf? A variegated leaf is the one which has got these green and white patches. So that is a variegated leaf. As you can see here, these are different examples of variegated leaves. So you've got this area which is white area and or a yellowish sort of an area which does not have any chlorophyll. So you can see there are portions of it and you see no two leaves are the same. Then this area again you can see here, this area here which is outside this is all the green area. And then you can see there is this area which is white. So this area which is the white area, this is the variegated part which does not contain any chlorophyll. Similarly here you can see also this part, and this part is the one which does not contain any chlorophyll. And of course you set up these experiments to realize that these areas will not have any starch and they will not photosynthesize. So these are variegated leaves, and it's very interesting to see that never ever is two leaves are the same. And this is, I think, Allah's kind creations in which there is such a lot of variation. For question 7, the answer was B, a plant that has white patches on its leaves. So that's called a variegated leaf. Then coming on to question number 8. Now the question 8 says the diagram shows the section of the wall of the small intestine, into which structure are most of the lipid components of the diet absorbed for transport to the rest of the body. And as I explained this in a previous paper also, this inside part, which is this inside part, is called the lacteal. And then all of this goes into, so these are called the lacteals, and then they drain into L lymphatics. And it's very easy to remember is lipids. So there are three L's: lipids, lacteals, lymphatics, or lymph vessels, which will of course carry this away. So the answer was A. D is the capillary network, B is the epithelium, C is of course the just the border epithelium, which is in the close to each other. Next, question 9. A surgical procedure involves the removal of the gallbladder. Yeah, if you have stones in the gallbladder, well, you have to remove them. So the gallbladder is removed, but doesn't do much of a harm to a person. It says, what are patients who have undergone this procedure not able to do? Well, if the gallbladder is missing, you have to remember is this is the liver, and the gallbladder stores the bile, and then there's the bile duct which carries this bile and it opens into the duodenum. So basically, the bile is stored in the gallbladder. So this is the gallbladder, and the gallbladder doesn't make the bile. The liver makes the bile. So liver makes the bile, and the bile is stored in the gallbladder. And bile, please remember, does not contain any enzymes. Bile has bile salts, which emulsify fats, means break down the large fat globules into smaller ones. So bile salts emulsify fat. So basically, what are patients not able to do? They are unable to store bile. So the bile directly drains into the small intestine. The bile has to drain because it's formed in the liver. So it just is not stored, but it continually keeps on draining into the small intestine. Question 10. The lengths of three parts of the human alimentary canal are shown. P is 350 centimeter, Q is 150 centimeter, and R is 26 centimeter. Now it says which row identifies these parts. Now the longest is P. If the longest is P, then you know it has to be the small intestine, which is the ileum, because the duodenum is just the first part of it, which is the smaller part of it. So if P is the longest, it has to be that the different choices are colon, duodenum, and ileum. So duodenum has to be R. So duodenum has to be R. Why? Because it's the shortest in length. So the answer is this: duodenum, ileum, colon. Because if you look at it, you see this is the esophagus, and the esophagus opens into the stomach, and then this part is the duodenum, only this part. And then of course we have the ileum, which is very long. And then this ileum opens into the large intestine, which is the colon, and the colon just forms this little structure here, and then goes like this, and then it empties here, and then this later part is, of course, is called the rectum, and this area is all the colon up to here. So you see the shortest would be the duodenum, which is this part, and then the longest would be the small intestine, which is of course very long, but I've just made it, and then of course the colon. So ileum, colon, and duodenum. Coming to question 11, which statement best describes the movement of water through the stem of a plant? Movement of water through the stem of a plant. Water moves of the stem as it evaporates from the leaves. Water moves of the stem as it is pushed by water entering the roots. Water moves up the stem because it is used in photosynthesis. Water moves up the stem by osmosis. Well, when it's moving up to the stem, it's moving in these tubes which are called xylem vessels. So it can't be osmosis because there's no partially permeable membrane involved. Water moves up the stem because it is used in photosynthesis. Well, that's not such a large figure. The water has to evaporate and has to come out. So it is only from the leaf that the evaporation causes this suction force, which of course pulls the water up the stem. Pulls the water up the stem. Please understand that terminology which I'm using. Then coming on to question number 12. A plant was placed in a water containing a black dye. After 24 hours, the plant was removed and sections were taken from the root and the stem. Which diagram shows it? But you know the root is on the inside and the stem is also on the inside. So it would be A. Here, of course, then they're showing you the black color. So the black color is where if you know the position of the vascular bundles, where you need to revise this if that is not clear to you. 13. In a muscle, which two substances show net movement from the plasma into the tissue fluid? Anything is not is a muscle is not just a muscle has been used, but it could be any tissue of your body. It could be your a lining of the stomach, it could be something in the intestine, it could be in the lungs, it could be any cell. Any cell of your body basically needs glucose and oxygen because that is the main ingredient required for respiration. So which two substances show net movement from the blood, this is the blood plasma, into the tissue fluid? So it's very clear that had to be something which was the basic nutrient, which is the fuel of the body. Then coming on to question number 14, through which valve does the blood pass as it leaves the right ventricle and which structure does it next reach? So let's look at the heart now. This is the diagram. And as we know, this is the right atrium, this is the left atrium, this is the right ventricle, and this is the left ventricle. So it says which valve as it leaves the right ventricle. So as it leaves the right ventricle, now leaves the right ventricle, it has to cross these valves here in the beginning of the pulmonary artery. So that would be the semilunar valves. And then it says, and which structure does it next reach? Does it reach what? The next structure is what is arising from it. This arising from it, this is the pulmonary artery. So the pulmonary artery arises from the right ventricle. So semilunar valves, it doesn't go, the aorta was wrong because aorta arises from the left ventricle. This is the aorta arising from the left ventricle. So that is why what we had to understand is if you know the correct structure of the heart, only then you could have done this question. Question 15. Question 15 says which statement about white blood cells is correct? They transport toxins from body tissue to the livers. They convert fibrinogen to fibrin when bleeding happens. They can produce antigens in response to. Which statements about white blood cells is correct? They can ingest bacteria by a process called phagocytosis. Now, yes, they do make antibodies, but look at this question. They've changed this word just to confuse you. They produce antigens. I'm sorry, antigens are on the surface of viruses or bacteria, and in response to this, antibodies are produced by the body. So, antigens are present on foreign microorganisms which might enter. Antigens could be present on anything. People have allergy to pollen, even pollen has antigens on its surface. Then coming to question 16, at night the temperature is 3 degrees Celsius. A person goes outside for 30 minutes and their body temperature drops. What is a reason for this temperature change? Now the possible answers is what is the reason for this temperature change? Why did the temperature drop a little? Is you've got to understand temperature is maintained because of aerobic respiration. And aerobic respiration releases energy. So if respiration is slightly, it's not going to be a lot of drop. This temperature cannot be a lot. It's very minute. Why? Because you see, your body temperature is maintained at 37 at all times. Basically, what is happening is that the energy is released by aerobic respiration. So the respiratory enzymes function a little slowly. So maybe a little bit of the temperature falls of the body, but very, very little. It isn't going to fall a lot. because you can't function if your body temperature falls. So the person cannot rid of carbon dioxide. That's wrong. The person has too much glucose for respiration. That's wrong. There's less oxygen in the cold air breathed in now. That's all rubbish. So the only answer was because respiration is the process which releases energy. I say this all the time, releases energy. Then question 17. The table shows the percentage of four gases in inspired and expired air. Which gas is carbon dioxide? Now, this is something which you have to remember. It's rote learning. Carbon dioxide is 0.04, 4.14 expired air. So the answer was A. This would be more probably like oxygen. This is nitrogen, and zero point 0.5 to 2 is must be some other gases. Then coming to question number 18. The graph shows how the pressure and volume inside the lung changes during one complete breath. At which point are the muscles of the diaphragm starting to contract? Now you have to relate this with volume. You see, the chest cavity is the one in which volume has to change. So diaphragm muscle contracts, intercostal muscles contract. They both contract and cause the volume to increase. So if they're just going to starting to contract, so the volume increase is starting here. This was the point. This is the volume graph. So you got to see where the volume had just started to increase, and that was point A. So this is what you have to understand is that when the diaphragm muscle contracts and the intercostal muscle contracts, they're going to increase the volume. So they're going to increase the volume, but it says starting to contract. So it will be just as the volume is increasing, then you'd had to be finding that point would be the point. And you see the other points B, C, and D is all irrelevant because they are different part of the cycle. And coming to last question, which is question number 19. How does the composition of the blood in the renal vein differ from that in the renal artery? Renal vein, so this is the kidney, and you have the renal artery entering it and bringing oxygenated blood. And then you have the renal vein coming out of it and entering the inferior vena cava and carrying blood back to the. So this would be the vein. So it says, how does the composition of blood in the renal vein differ from? So the renal vein will have a lower concentration of urea. Why? Because all the urea from the blood has been filtered out. So the urea from the blood has been filtered out. As it goes in, it divides into different branches and forms this. So the urea has been filtered out, and the urea is going to, of course, I'm drawing it on top of this, is going to enter the ureter. So this is the ureter. So the urea has to be more, has to be less. So how is the composition in the renal vein different from that in the renal artery? So the renal vein will have less urea because some urea does go back, and it will have more carbon dioxide. Why would it have more carbon dioxide? Because the cells of the kidneys are respiring and producing carbon dioxide. In every organ of the body, the vein leaving it will have more carbon dioxide because the cells of that organ are aerobically respiring and producing carbon dioxide. So carbon dioxide has been produced by aerobic respiration in every cell of our body. So aerobic respiration is going to produce carbon dioxide. So every vein of the body will have more carbon dioxide in it. And that completes this video, and we will continue the rest of these questions in the second video. And thank you very much.